Good morning. It's time for Thursday Wisdom from the book of Proverbs. As we've been going through this book, we come to chapter 15 and verses 16 and 17, where we read this: Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble with it. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a fatted ox with hatred. You know, something happens to us because we're human and because we have kind of a natural love for this world. Something happens when we run into money, if we ever do, or if we get wealthy. There's actually a name for it. It's called sudden wealth syndrome. And it refers to what happens when someone suddenly comes into a lot of money, into wealth, whether it's by winning the lottery or receiving an inheritance. Something changes with a person, with their relationships. They become paranoid, their behavior changes, they're just not the people they used to be. The scripture tells us that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and we see that that's true with people who are wealthy, sometimes, not all the times. Actually, speaking of inheritances, one time in the life of Jesus, in the ministry of Jesus, a young man came up to him who was squabbling with his brother about an inheritance they'd received together from their parents, and he asked Jesus to intervene. And instead of intervening, Jesus told him a parable. He began by saying, a man's life does not consist in the abundance of what he has. That's the key point. Then he tells the parable of a rich fool. He was a businessman. He was already wealthy, but a great growing season had made him even more wealthy. And he looked around. He didn't have any place to store his crops. And apparently it didn't occur to him to share his crops, to be generous and give them away. And so he decided he would tear down his barns and build bigger ones to store them. And it was that day that God spoke to him and said, "You fool, today your soul is required of you. Who's going to get all of your riches now?" So it can be a fool's errand to chase wealth and to somehow feel like by being wealthy you will be content, because it's just not the way we were made. When we have a little and love with it, it's better than having great treasure and trouble with it. You know, when we were first married, Suzanne and I, we had virtually nothing. And we managed to scrape up some money to rent our first apartment, and we moved up into the second floor 3-room apartment in Dover, which was very sparsely furnished. We managed to get a sofa, and we had to lean it up against the wall because the back kept falling down. We had a chair that had 3 legs, not 4, and so I managed to gather some of my college books to be the 4th leg. And so, but we often look back on those days, on that year in our first apartment, as some of the happiest days of our lives. Why? Because we had love. We had a little and love with it. We didn't have great treasure and we didn't have trouble. And I'm sure that some of you have memories just like this, where you think back to times that were so happy and it had nothing to do with what you had or didn't have, because God has made us for himself. And when we realize the truth that Jesus shares at the end of that parable, he says to the rich fool, or he says to the young man who came to him, who was squabbling with his brother, he said, "So is everyone Just like the rich fool, so is everyone who stores up treasure for himself, but is not rich toward God. So this morning, take some time, assuming you don't have fabulous wealth, take some time to celebrate the fact that you don't, that you have a little. Celebrate the fact that you have a little. And moreover, celebrate the fact that you have great treasure in the person of Jesus Christ, in the love of God, the treasure that endures forever. God bless your Thursday. We had a great time, by the way, last night in our Bible study, talking about some of these very things. So I hope you'll check it out if you weren't able to be with us. The video is posted on this note. God bless.